All right, good morning, everyone. We'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. Second day of the September Kansas Board of Regents meeting. Appreciate everybody being here this morning. Appreciate yesterday we got through a lot of really important information in a timely manner. Thank you for letting me test you with a 2+ hour meeting right off the bat. But appreciate everybody that was a part of the agenda. I appreciate you getting that through as quickly as possible. As you'll recall, then at 3:30 we broke for a reception. President Flanders, thank you to you and your team for arranging that, where we welcome back several former regents, former CEOs, and then also a number of office staff here that have served over the years. So it was great to see all of them. Great conversation. We continue that over dinner last evening with many of the former regents and the former CEOs, and just really humbled by the vision and the passion of so many of those that have served in these roles before. And it was a great opportunity to thank them for what they've done. Then this morning, we had the opportunity to have breakfast with our student government leaders. And I guess my message would be for all of you is the future of our state is in great hands. This was an incredibly impressive group. Always loved that conversation, and especially love that the items that they typically want to talk about won't benefit them personally, but would benefit their fellow students and generations of students to follow. So really enlightening conversation this morning, and appreciate the student government leaders taking the time to meet with us and for their service on their campuses. So before we get started, we are going to have one amendment to the agenda based on the BASC recommendation that Regent Johnston mentioned yesterday. The second item that we will discuss today, let me hold it up, make sure I get the number correctly. Item 7, yes, item 7.2, act on the K-State request to waive the bachelor's degree requirements. We're going to change that from act to discuss. So please note that amendment to the agenda. Any other additions before we get started? Okay. Moving on into the Thursday discussion agenda, we will receive an update on the Higher Learning Commission guidelines for reduced credit bachelor's programs, and I'll turn it over to Vice President Monholland. Good morning.
Thank you, Chair Benson. Good morning, everyone. This particular item can be found on page 136 of your board materials. A little background first. Maybe it's not turned on. There have been some efforts over the years and at this agency, especially to bring down the number of required hours for a bachelor's degree. In 2017, the board directed the universities to reduce all baccalaureate programs to 120 credit hours, or to seek an exception to that request. The board in 2019 created some new requirements and expectations, and by that time, the number or the percentage of programs, bachelor's degrees with more than 120 credits decreased from about 67% to 8%. So we've had a bit of a history to try to bring down the number of required credits. Nationally, there's been a movement dating back to probably 2010 or so to bring that down even further below the standard, the typical 120 credits. You may recall earlier this year, we shared information about a growing trend, a nationwide trend, that of the reduced credit bachelor degree, or RBCD, as I'll refer to it, because it takes too long to say it the other way. RCBDs require fewer than the standard 120 credit hours for most bachelor's degrees, usually falling somewhere between 90 and 105. Proponents of these degrees claim they are affordable and match up well with workplace skills demands. Others dismiss them, arguing industry does not recognize them and that they lack the scope and the depth of traditional bachelor's degrees. Regardless of how one perceives them, they are spreading. Last September, the Higher Learning Commission, or the HLC, which accredits Kansas colleges and universities, issued guidelines and an application process for institutions wishing to offer these type of degrees. The nation's other regional accreditors likewise have provided guidance for their members. HLC accredited institutions wanting to offer an RCBD must first get state approval before applying to HLC through its substantive change process to ensure that the degrees meet HLC's criteria for accreditation. This process takes typically about 6 to 8 months. I mentioned that there's been a spread of reduced credit bachelor's degrees. In 2023, Brigham Young, Idaho, and Ensign College in Utah became the nation's first institutions to receive approval from their accreditor to offer a reduced credit bachelor's degree. Nationally, about some 60 or so plan to offer or are indeed offering now an RCBD. University of Maine system has 5 online RCBDs. The Utah system of higher education is urging its institutions to begin offering bachelors of applied science or studies, excuse me. And Indiana, I think, probably has taken maybe the most prescriptive step in that its state legislature is now requiring all public institutions to offer at least one RCBD. I don't know why it says RCBE, but the Higher Learning Commission since March of 25 has approved 9 institutions, which you can see up here on the slide, to offer these degrees. I think if you look at the institutions, they're all private institutions, except for the last one, Yavapai Community College in Arizona. So private institutions are not subject to state policies like our institutions are, so they're able maybe to move a little more quickly. And that this is an area in which there's interest from community colleges of moving into as well. As I said, in many states, including Kansas, statutes or policies are incompatible with RCBDs. Our policy on bachelor's degrees, we defined a bachelor's degree in a very specific way. It has to have a minimum of 120 credits, a minimum of 45 upper division credits, and a specific major. K-State has submitted a proposal for an RCBD in uncrewed aircraft systems. It meets the requirements of the bachelor's degree definition for the 45 upper division credits and the major, but it requires only 90 to 93 credits. So it's asking for a waiver of that particular part of the board policy. Regardless of how we proceed on this proposal, it's become clear that we as a system need to think thoughtfully about the reduced credit bachelor's degree and where it fits, if it fits at all, in our strategic plans. If we can reach a consensus that the RCBD could benefit students and benefit the state, we must either amend our existing bachelor's degree policy or create a new policy specifically for this type of degree. we've identified a number of questions, by no means an exhaustive list of questions, that we've pulled together to stimulate discussion about the reduced credit bachelor's degree and its place in Kansas public higher education. I'll just walk through these very quickly. Sorry, I jumped ahead of myself. I think maybe the most important one, what is the value of a reduced credit bachelor's degree? Will business and industry accept it? Would it have more value? Would it be enhanced if we tied it directly, specifically to workforce needs and demands? If we think that's a good idea, do we have a different approval process? Should we distinguish this degree from the traditional bachelor's degree by giving it a different name? SAC COC, the creditor for many of the southern schools, requires or suggests something like undergraduate specialist or workforce specialist. Does a reduced credit bachelor's degree reduce the value of a traditional 120 credit bachelor's degree? Should we just open it up once we've put in a policy and let institutions start offering these degrees? Should we pilot a few select programs to see what the workforce and industry demand might be? Then those kind of meta questions, those big questions, then we'll have to get down to some of the detail. What kind of parameters do we put around it? What is the range of credit hours? Do we require all 34 to 35 credit hours in our system-wide general education? How is math pathways and English pathways going to fit into these degrees? Do we modify the number of upper division courses so that there's some transferability from an associate degree into these new degrees? And how do we transcript these new degrees? So that's, I don't have the answers for these questions, and many of these may just be rhetorical, but I hope they can begin a conversation about, is this something we want or believe will have value in the state? And if so, how do we proceed to ensuring that it works best for students?
First of all, thank you so much, Vice President Mulholland. I would imagine there will be feedback and questions from my colleagues, so we'll open it up for that at this point. Questions for Vice President Mulholland?
Good morning. I don't want to put you on the spot, but I guess I'm going to. You mentioned that there are Kansas statutes and policies that are incompatible. Do you know which statute or policy?
I probably worded that wrong. I said many states, including Kansas. We don't have a statute, but we do have a policy.
A policy.
And the policy is how we define a bachelor's degree.
Thank you.
And really, reduced credit is merely an adjective modifying the bachelor's degree. So I think we have to proceed that this is a bachelor's degree, and we have to use that definition because that's what our policy says at the moment.
Thank you.
Other questions for Vice President Mulholland? Yes, Regent Barasker.
I have a comment more than a question, but on this topic, my comment would be, it depends on which segment of the industry we are talking about. I think not all segments could fit into the 3-year degree. And also, for example, an industry like technology that's ever growing, there is no stop for education in technology. For those industries, there are specific type of specific type of areas that we can see this, because we always say that by the time they graduate in 4 years and 2 years, the technology is already gone. We're looking for a new segment. So there is some value for that in certain areas, is what my thought process is. But I also think we strongly, if we are even considering this, we have to go to the industry and ask them for their feedback instead of just floating this and see what they do, is what my strong suggestion is.
I think another question that I would have as we look at all angles of this is I think one reason to look at it and discuss it and is to ensure that we're remaining competitive with other states that are already getting out there. But I would just be curious from an enrollment standpoint, how many new students this would create for our institutions and or the impact on student retention that it could have. And I don't know if there will be a way as we look at this to quantify that, but I would just be interested in the impact on enrollment that this might have.
I don't know that we could predict that or project it accurately. I think there's a lot of, there's probably a consensus that adult learners, adults who have, or students who have already accumulated some credits, they might be a very fertile market, a group to try to reach out to, because they would not have to, get to 120, they could get to 90 and earn a degree. So that it could work as a completion program for many people. And my guessing is it's probably going to be what we've seen in the list I put up earlier about HLC. Many of these are what I would call in more growing technical type fields where they're not the traditional bachelor's degree like history or English that are being reduced down. Although I've heard some institutions are considering that. So if there's the demand, I think that's what will ultimately drive the enrollment for various programs.
Do you have a question, Regent Johnston?
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you bringing forward all the many questions that, we may have as we look at a draft policy around this really important topic that I think will be very, very impactful. Chair Benson, is it okay if we kind of just sort of move into the next discussion, number two, or shall we wait?
Yeah, before we do that, I know we had some other questions from Regent Mendoza, Regent Amar.
Dr. Von Hollen, when we had previously talked about this, I believe in the spring, we had talked about was there a possibility of calling this something different? Because we already had a definition of what we identified as a bachelor's degree, right? In your presentation, you mentioned that the terms undergraduate specialist or workforce specialist, are there other states or is it being called that elsewhere? Or I guess in my mind, if we have a clear definition of what a bachelor's degree is, maybe this doesn't quite fit into there, but it's still worth looking into. So
Yeah, we did have that conversation, and I've been thinking ever since then what would be a good name for this. The Southern Association of Colleges and Schools, which accredits it's the Southern counterpart to HLC, requires something other than a bachelor's degree in the title. HLC calls it a bachelor's degree, just a reduced credit bachelor's degree, as does the other regional accreditors. So only one national regional accreditor has made that determination. I think that was my initial thinking that would be a good approach. But we had some conversations yesterday that kind of opened up some ideas that I hadn't thought of, that students will want to take this degree, enroll in this program because it is a bachelor's degree. And if it's called something other than a bachelor's degree, perhaps they may not be interested in it. So again, I think there's merits on both sides of that argument, and I think it's all the more reason we need to work through some of these issues and reach some kind of a consensus on it.
I did have one more question, or just a thought, and you'll have to forgive if we have some accreditors saying we have to call it this other thing. But then we have some that are calling it a bachelor's degree. And we have somebody that comes in, let's say you have two applicants that come in to apply for a position and they both present a bachelor's degree. How is an employer going to differentiate? Because we talk about, is it going to devalue the value of a bachelor's degree? How are they going to differentiate that if we have some that are, you could come in with a degree from out of state where it says a bachelor's degree, but they earned it in a way that wouldn't have fit our or the other applicant's bachelor's degree. Does that make sense?
It does. I think the way HLC is approaching it is these would be kind of categorized as bachelors of applied studies or bachelors of applied science. Although we already have BASs that are 120 credits, so it's not a clear distinction between those. I think it's potentially an issue. Maybe industry will understand the distinctions, but I don't know how they will if there's not some kind of title or some reference that distinguishes between these two types of bachelor's degrees. I think we understand, well, maybe not everyone understands the difference between an associate of arts and an associate of science and an associate of applied science. They are not the same degree. And maybe that's the example there. I think they often get conflated. They're both useful, very good degrees, depending on one's choices, but I think it's a similar type of issue.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I know that we've been working on this for a while, and we have probably more questions now than we did before. So I just want to thank you and the academic affairs staff for taking this on and digging into this. And I think it's a good opportunity for us, for our state, but we've got to do it right and figure out all those questions first. So thank you.
When I was at the SHIO meeting earlier this year, someone suggested we call them associates. I didn't like it.
We'll get the marketing folks involved on that. Yeah. Yeah. Regent Amar. Okay. Yes, Regent Wolfmore.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you for presenting this to us. So I'm not on the BAS committee, and so is the idea that, for example, I'll just pick a profession, a career choice, electrical engineer, that there would be a reduced credit option and a full credit option? Is that the idea behind it?
I suppose there could be any number of options. I don't think engineering or programs that are accredited by an outside
Yeah, okay,
agency.
bad example probably.
But use history, for example. It requires 120 credits typically. You could, I suppose, reduce that down to 90.
Because I wonder if we make ourselves sort of a bit of a slave to the employment sort of fluctuations. I mean, in times of full employment, when there's more employers wanting people to take jobs, that might be something that would be very marketable. But certainly at times when the employment situation changes and there's high unemployment, there, we might subject ourselves to the whims of the economic market. And that would be one concern I'd like to understand a little more.
I don't, this is my personal view, I'm not sure it'd be a good idea for our institutions to have 120 credit option and a 90 credit option. That probably, I'm thinking it should be one or the other.
Okay.
And there are good reasons why we require 120 credits for many degrees. But if it's the right type of degree that's meeting the right type of need, it's certainly possible, and I think very practical approach to you could accomplish that in 90 credit hours. Another issue I didn't bring up is if you have a bachelor's degree, a reduced credit bachelor's degree, What do you do if you decide later on you want to go to graduate school? I'm not sure many graduate programs are going to be willing to accept that as,
That would be a very important consideration. Thank you very much.
President Flanders.
Yes, I appreciate the board really digging into this, and we'll get a group stood up and really start to work through this policy. I think, and I'm quite sure that this board, as we take a look at this and these specific options perhaps, really would have no interest moving our system backwards. And kind of what I mean by that is, so you have a student at a community college, they get a 60 credit hour associate degree. Now they transfer into a reduced baccalaureate, and we tell them, well, only 45 of those are really going to count. And so, so I think we can do this with perhaps taking the full associate degree, but that would mean we'll have to change the 45 credit hour policy. So there's some things that would have to move. And from what I've heard from employers many times is the durable skills that are in baccalaureate degrees are what are highly valued and lasting in the workplace. And so if we're thinking about, well, let's just skinny down or gut the system-wide general education and get all of our savings out of those credits, I think, obviously, I think this board would believe that'd be a huge mistake. And so I think there's ways to put these perhaps together, but it's not going to be as simple as just grabbing the upper division courses and dropping them onto a skinny gen ed portion, and then not allowing transfer from the community colleges. So,
Regent Johnston.
Well, like I said, thank you. I think that it's apparent that there's a great deal of interest in this, but obviously it's something that needs to be done very thoughtfully because of the impact that it is. I appreciate my fellow regents' questions on this because I think they've thought a lot about it too. I can say that from Basque's point of view, our intention is certainly not to try to stymie this or to slow walk it, but to make sure that we have input from all the sectors and that obviously it's a thoughtful process. Saying that, we're still aware though that obviously we're needing to move forward on this given that there is competition from other states and that we want to make sure that we too are taking advantage of something that could be very beneficial to students and also to business and industry. But something that too, as you can tell from all the questions, has enough guardrails on it that we feel like we're getting the best bang for our buck and meeting the needs and not accidentally causing a lot of other complications for the other degrees. Because, as we all know, a lot of times when we set policy, we can have unintended consequences. And we want to try to avoid that at all costs. So I really appreciate everybody's input on this, and we would continue as a BAS committee to ask for your input and your thoughts on how best to move forward with this process.
I believe you had a question, Regent Dicus.
Not being on Basque and hearing the further details, it seems more like a technical college degree, that you're getting a technical skill in this 90 hours versus the 120 hours of the baccalaureate degree. So I don't know how you kind of look and distinguish those type of things, but then I say that, but the 8 degrees that you had are colleges, 2 or 3 of them were in a degree, a 90-hour degree in business administration, which is not necessarily a technical type degree, because I think the one looking at K-State's, sounds more like a technical skills that you're trying to develop in the unmanned crew. So I don't know how all that works out in the potential for a degree like this, so.
and that's, I think, to President Flanders' point, the general education curriculum is really the foundation of those durable skills. You know, that's where you start building it. And in this particular proposal from K-State, the full complement of our system-wide gen ed is included in there. So, you know, I understand what you're saying, but it's not, it has like a traditional bachelor's degree, the full general education curriculum.
Any input from our CEOs as we begin the journey of looking at this?
I might ask if my provost might want to talk a little bit about what we're looking at trying to do
Sure,
and what
and
we're
we'll
trying to
transition.
propose, and maybe describe some of the rationale and justification in the thinking.
Okay, so with that, we'll officially go to the next agenda item so that we can talk specific, but well, I guess before, because I would hate for any of our other CEOs to feel like they're opining on a K-State request. So before we officially go to the next agenda item, any of our other CEOs, any input or feedback on this before we close it out? Okay. All right, so we'll officially move on to discuss Kansas State University's request to waive bachelor's degree requirements. So, yep, sorry. Yeah, but, okay, but yeah. I didn't know if I needed to officially announce it. Yeah, it is announced. So, Vice President Monhana, I don't know if you had anything else to add before Provost Mendez comes up and talks specifically. No, you're fine. Specifically about the K-State request.
I'll defer to Regent Johnston.
Okay.
Thank you. And like I said before, we greatly appreciate the thought that's already put into this, and certainly the work on behalf of board staff and K-State in bringing this proposal forward. What Basque would like to recommend, and like I said, keeping in mind that we don't want to, you know, accidentally, you know, really stymie the process, but knowing that that this needs a whole lot of thought and input from some people, the Basque committee would recommend, as we said yesterday, that we put together a working group, and hopefully board staff will do that quickly in terms of putting together a group that represents all the sectors, because I think that, as President Flanders says, it's important to get the perspective from the two-year institutions and how important that gen ed core is when we look at those durable skills as we talked about. And so we would certainly like to see that working group put together with all sectors involved. And then Basque would also recommend then that that working group, and that can also include business and industry, because I think that Regent Parasker's recommendation was a good one on that, but that they would come up then with a draft policy that the board could take a look at.
Thank you, Regent Johnston.
I have nothing more.
Okay.
I'll
Well,
yield
maybe
to Provost.
call up Provost Mendez or President Linton.
If I could just, I wanted to clarify kind of the purpose of bringing the provost up. It's not specifically for this request. It's for the conversations and the rationale and the justification for this way of thinking. So it's more, what are the kinds of things we've been talking about? What's the markets that we've been looking at?
Okay. Appreciate that context. So Provost Mendez.
Just wanted to say I'm excited. I want to thank Vice President Mulholland of setting up the stage to have these conversations at the task force. We're looking forward to being a part of it and being a part of this movement going forward. Our interest is, you know, this is a year old. HLC released guidance on the 3-year reduced bachelor's degree this time last September. Overall, we've been reaching out to other schools that have developed them. We've reached out to accreditation agencies that have approved them, the Northwest Accreditation of Colleges and Universities. We invited their former president on our campus several months ago to talk through it. The advice that we've gotten from other institutions and from other accreditation agencies is that we need to first look at competencies, and learning outcomes first, and then build degree after that. Regent Prasker brings up that it's a workforce development exercise, and that's totally true. This is the first of several that we're working on right now. There's other areas in which that their workforce needs are not being met overall. I did want to emphasize that this is our approach at K-State is not to use this as a degree to meet unmet workforce needs. What this conversation is not about taking a bachelor's degree in psychology and reducing it down to 3 years. Our focus is to put forward, give the Board of Regents a couple of different looks at what this may look like overall. And it's with degrees that we don't have on the books right now going forward. You have a UAS degree in front of that we've submitted. We're working on a couple of different degrees on AI as well. Another aspect of this is that this is not necessarily a creature of four-year institutions. It's going to be really important for us to partner with two-year institutions and technical colleges across the state to meet this demand. So this is not an ownership issue. And I think we need to think really carefully about, how do we kind of arrange that across the board. So I appreciate President Flanders' comments about that. Lastly, and I know we have a full agenda today, is the importance of working with faculty on this. We have been working with faculty and talking with them about this. This is a little bit of a game changer overall, and we need to be very cautious. We need to be very careful on how we frame the conversation. So I appreciate the comments of the regents here, and looking forward to working with Vice President Mulholland in the next couple of months.
Thank you, Provost Mendez. Any other questions, any feedback? All great discussion. Look forward to the continued conversation, and appreciate everybody's thoughts on that. All right, we will move now to I will receive a report on program accreditation. Again, Vice President Mulholland. Is that not correct?
It is.
Okay.
I'm just waiting for my. Oh, what happened? Well, never mind. I'll go without the slides. I'm sorry. The Board of Regents offers or compiles a report. No, don't worry about it, Steve. Compiles a report on the accreditation status of the state universities in various programs. Within each that have specialized accreditation once every 4 years. And this is the fourth year, and this report is being presented to the board for its acceptance. As you probably know, accreditation is a process certifying that institutions and programs have met a specified set of standards. There are two broad types of accreditation in post-secondary education: institutional accreditation and the specialized accreditation of academic units or programs. The accreditation of post-secondary institution occurs through a system of accrediting bodies approved by the U.S. Department of Education. As I mentioned earlier, public post-secondary institutions in Kansas are accredited by the HLC, one of 6 regional accreditors in the United States. Specialized accreditation of academic units or programs occurs through a system of organizations based in academic disciplines. The U.S. Department of Education provides oversight through its review of federally recognized accrediting agencies. Program accreditation is most prevalent in professional programs such as architecture, engineering, nursing, law, and teacher education. This year's report, the 2024 accreditation report, we can report that each of our universities is fully accredited by the Higher Learning Commission. In addition, they list the accreditation status of individual programs as at each institution. I won't go into, I won't list them all out, but the 6 universities in the KU Medical Center all have specialized accreditation in various areas: engineering, business, health fields, education. but I can report and feel confident that they're all fully accredited as they should. So our recommendation is to just the board accept this report.
Okay, any questions? Yes, Regent Johnston.
Sorry, I didn't have a question. I was going to make a motion,
Oh,
but no, but I just want to say that I really appreciate the report, and I was I was really impressed with the number of outside accreditors there are in terms of the work that has to be done at the institutions. Because you talk about a heavy lift, I was like, wow, that's a ton, and I appreciate all you folks doing that, because I can't imagine how much time, energy, and resources have gone into that. But I think that it gives us a lot of credibility. So since you gave me the mic, I had to say that. But I would move to accept the report.
I don't know that we necessarily need a motion and a second to receive, do we?
It'd be fine.
Okay, all right. Well, we do have a motion, second by Vice Chair Mendoza. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, report is received. All right, we'll move on now to a request to change accreditation policy.
Nice segue, yes. During the last legislative session, the Kansas legislature passed Senate Bill 78, which requires the governing body of each post-secondary education institution in Kansas to regularly review and update accreditation policies. It also prohibits accrediting agencies from compelling institutions to violate state laws. SB 78 requires that before the end of this year, each governing body of a post-secondary educational institution shall identify the accrediting agencies or associations eligible to accredit the institutions. These shall be agencies or associations recognized by the U.S. Department of Education as contained in their database. And then update the policies and practices of on accreditation for these institutions to ensure that the institution may freely pursue accreditation by any agency or association contained in that U.S. Department of Ed database. Board staff reviewed the board policy on accreditation. It's Chapter 3A12. And we identified some what we believe are necessary updates to the policy so that it aligns with SB 78. The changes are in your board book. They're also on this slide. It's basically removing language that restricts the kind of accreditor, and it allows the institution then to freely pursue accreditation by any recognized by the U.S. Department of Ed. So this is merely an exercise to make sure that board policy aligns with state statute.
All right, thank you. Questions, feedback? Not, would entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Regent Amar,
I can second.
second by Regent Parasker. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right. Moving on, receive information on distribution of fiscal year 2026 state appropriations for community colleges. Vice President Frisbee.
Good morning. I am referencing Regent's page 143, starting on page 43 of your board agenda for September. You may recall when we met back in June, May, there were discussions about how the appropriations were structured for our state aid line items for what we distribute to the community and technical colleges. There was one additional proviso attached to 2 of our line items specific only to the community colleges, which required that they certify to us as of June 30 what they estimated their cash on hand to be. And so we went through a process of developing a form for them to fill out, and they all submitted their information to us in July with their best estimates for where they ended up last fiscal year. The requirement is that they have less than 6 months cash on hand. That was a standard that was set by the legislature in order for them to be eligible for two of their state aid accounts, one of which is the business and industry and apprenticeship distribution. And there's a table of the state aid amounts at the top of page 144. And the Student Success Initiative distribution as outlined on the numbers on page 145. And as it turned out, from the 19 community colleges that certified their amounts to us, 18 of the colleges did certify amounts that were less than 6 months cash on hand. So Dr. Flanders submitted a letter to Accounts and Reports certifying that that's where our status was. And so we have distributed those amounts of state aid to the colleges. Johnson County Community College is the one institution that did not qualify, at least on a preliminary basis. So what will happen next, their funding from those two line items, which total together about 5.2 million, sits in that account. And if it isn't spent by June 30, it will lapse back to the state general fund. We will go through a process every year. We receive each of the college's financial statements and audits, and we will go back and re-verify everybody's eligibility in accordance with what they initially reported to us. So that's my report on the first item here before you today.
Any questions for Vice President Frisbee?
I know we've talked about this in academic affairs, but I had another question. Do we know what these funds go towards when we give these funds to the university colleges?
To the colleges, there is no requirement in the language for what that is devoted to. I believe the Technical Education Authority, and Vice President White can correct me, I believe we've requested some information. I believe we gathered that maybe a year or two ago. We can go back and get that for you.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much.
Any other questions? All right, we'll move on to acting on distribution of fiscal year 2026 appropriations for technical education.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Starting then on page 146. So what I was relating to you before related to a proviso attached to funding for this year. This is also an important line item for our community and technical colleges. The Excel and CTE program, commonly known as SB 155 or Senate Bill 155. This was passed back in 2011, started in fiscal year 2022. The Excel and CTE initiative has its own account appropriated to us. And enrollment we've had great success at the colleges now. We've had a bit of a rebound from our pandemic effects on our enrollment. And we have now come to a point this year where we have come up short in the amount that we estimated we would need compared to what enrollments are. So you'll see a table on page 147 that outlines the timeline for how this funding is distributed. There is a proviso, again, attached to this line item that requires that the board distribute the funding by no later than the 60th day following the first class start date. And every one of the colleges, many of them are on the same schedule, but not everybody is. So we calculated that out for you. So Flint Hills started the earliest on August 11th. So that 60th day, then we have to distribute the money by October 10th. So this is why we're here before you today. We are seeking approval of the amounts shown in the tables on pages 148 and 149. Those amounts in the state aid fiscal year 2026 column reflect a proration down equally across the board in an equal manner for each of the colleges. These calculations were done for AY 2025 data that was just certified to us less than 2 weeks ago. And the Tech Ed Authority met last week and approved these amounts for us. Be happy to answer any questions on those two line items.
Questions for Vice President Frisbee? Yes, Regent Parasker.
So according to my understanding, we calculated that it should be around $52,589,901, but we had to prorate it because we started late?
We prorated for lack of money.
Gotcha.
Lack of cash.
All right, got it.
Now, I do want to add, and we talked about this in fiscal affairs, the two amounts sitting that total 5.2 million in the accounts from Johnson County Community College, in those two accounts could potentially be moved over to this account. We have legal authority in our bill to move those monies. We would not want to do that, though, until we came back with the financial audits and knew for certain that everybody was eligible and Johnson County did not, in fact, have that cash on hand in accordance with the proviso. But that is a possibility within this fiscal year.
Any other questions? If not, would entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Motion by Regent Johnston, second by Regent Wolf Moore. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, thank you, Vice President Frisbee. Next up, discuss and act on board policy amendments. Director Chad Bristow.
Morning. Thank you, Chair Benson. The reference material for the fiscal affairs and audit discussion item number 3 begins on page 154 in the board book. And it's for consideration of an amendment to update the board's facilities policy that would do 2 primary things. One, increase the university CEO's authority to approve small capital projects from under $500,000 up to the level of under $1.5 million. And secondly, the facilities policy update would address concerns about unnecessary, lengthy approval processes for amendments to previously approved larger capital projects. This would happen by delegating authority to the president and CEO to approve program statement and amendment to the projects that have already previously been approved by the board as part of the 5-year capital plans. Also in the policy changes, there are clarifying edits throughout that will just update language that's no longer relevant. And finally, if I may, I'd like to acknowledge and express appreciation to KBOR Associate General Counsel Gage Rolfe, who has been supportive throughout this process in this particular facilities policy update, as well as previous updates. And Gage has reviewed statutes, developed and refined facilities policy language, and synthesized multiple approval parameters in the matrix that can be seen on page 156. So really thank him for his work on this.
I would echo that. Thank you so much, Gage. Any questions for Director Bristow? Yes, Regent Wolf Moore.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Not a question, but one thing we did bring up for the benefit of the rest of the committee in the fiscal affairs that, at least from my point of view, fully supportive of this, but the board would be kept apprised of those items that are approved or override by our president so we can get the trend of sort of what's going on. So
Appreciate that.
thank you very much.
Any other questions? If not, would entertain a motion to approve. Motion by Regent Dicus.
I can second.
Okay, second by Regent Parasker. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion carries. Next up, discuss board member conflict of interest disclosure statements and act on actual or apparent conflicts. General Counsel John Urey.
Thank you, Chair Benson. The materials for this item start on page 160 of your board books. In accordance with board policy, our annual conflict of interest disclosure forms have been submitted by all regents, and those are summarized in the materials. One addition I want to note is that Regent Johnston continues to serve on the board of the Community Health Center of Southeast Kansas. We talked about that last November, and that's a Kansas nonprofit that provides student health services at Pittsburgh State University. So that is one addition to the written materials. Staff recommends approving continued membership of the regents on the boards identified in the disclosures, which are summarized in the materials. Either because service on those boards is required by law in the case of Regent Dicus serving on the Washburn Board of Regents, or is not subject to the board's conflict of interest policy, or has been determined to be the most beneficial, more beneficial to an institution and potentially harmful to the board or the system as discussed in the issue paper. Board approval of continued service on these regents on these boards should be conditioned on regents recognizing that their duty is first and foremost to the Board of Regents, and that if any actual conflict does arise, they will take appropriate action to manage or remedy those conflicts. And regarding the contracts or transactions in which the regents have reported interest, Staff recommends directing the involved regents to excuse themselves from participating on behalf of the board in matters involving or related to those contracts or transactions, or as otherwise recommended by the Board Governance Committee, which met yesterday and approved these recommendations for consideration by the board. So.
Appreciate all your work on this. Very important. Any questions for John? If not, would entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Okay, motion by Regent Amar. Second by Regent Johnston. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. All right, thank you again, John. All right, we'll now receive a plan to update the board's strategic plan, Building a Future. President Flanders.
That's on page 163 of the board materials. I think it's time as we've had building a future in place now for a number of years to just take a look back and refresh the plan and hone the plan in to be as successful as possible. Just as a reminder, we started this work. We had a plan called Foresight 2020, and the lesson learned there is don't ever put a date in your plan because that means 2020 is going to arrive and then your plan's over. We started a couple of years early and really started thinking about what should our plan for higher education look like in Kansas. And most plans in most states, and it's still true today, are completely institutional centric. They don't speak about what the institutions do to lift up their state, to lift up families, and to really help businesses. They talk more about how do we increase our ranking. One good way to do that is how do we turn down more students so that our acceptance rates are lower so that we become more prestigious. Instead, this board said, let's see what we can do to help Kansas families, to help Kansas businesses and really increase economic prosperity. I don't expect that broad framework to change. We went through several focus groups at a number of communities. It's difficult to remember all of them, but we did go to Dodge City, Garden City, Colby, Pittsburgh, Manhattan, Wichita, Kansas City, and Topeka. Number of communities. We talked to groups, and the local chambers were very helpful. They put together business groups that we did focus groups with, and then the local schools were helpful. We'd go in and talk to parents and families. We want to do some of that again. I thought this morning with the student group was almost like a focus group. You know, when we hear things like, hey, we need a day in the spring that people can apply free. Hey, we need more consistent advising across. And then one student saying, well, our university has it. And another saying, so then how do we scale that across? So I looked back and saw where we have been successful. Like I said, there's a lot of plans across the nation. This just happens to be the best one. And I just mean that because this plan has moved a system, and as you saw yesterday, and has improved the metrics as opposed to just throwing metrics out and hoping. And the way we've done that is we've really built out Pillar 1. And Pillar 1 is helping Kansas families. And we want to look and see how do we do that with our other pillars, or do our other pillars need some realignment? And I think the only way you really make improvement is you have to change daily behavior or change the way you're doing things in order for the metrics to change. It's not just, we're not just going to hope it into existence. The student success plans were a big part of that. And moving to a early warning system, you know, all these kinds of things. And then also getting resource to do that. And some of our bedrock goals and stewardship goals, you know, such as the facilities initiative, that conversation yesterday was completely different than what would have happened 10 years ago. We'd have been talking about how do we build as many new buildings as possible. That conversation now with every university was, how do we decrease our deferred maintenance? How do we increase our efficiencies? How do we make sure our footprint and our space utilization is the best? And that culture has completely changed over the last perhaps 5-6 years. So I think we can do that with pillars 2 and 3, but we need to focus on what kind of leading behaviors and indicators. How do we really increase research at our universities? That's not something we're just going to hope in. You know, do we need more proposals? Do we need more multidisciplinary proposals? Do we need facilities that encourage multidisciplinary proposals so that they can be larger proposals and perhaps bring more resource and more innovation to Kansas? And then pillar 3, creating economic prosperity. We've been great partners with the Department of Commerce, but what kinds of things need to take place now to really start to realize the benefit of that more than just the metric? You know, do we need a business and industry council for the entire system? Do we need to have a structural relationship with the Department of Commerce? We kind of heard that. As we talked to the Department of Commerce at the board retreat, we didn't get a 10 in terms of a 1 to 10 rating on how we're doing. It was more modest than that, but that's okay because we know we can improve in that vein. So that's what we want to do. We want to sharpen the plan, probably sharpen our dashboard a bit. It's become, every metric on there is a great idea, but when you put them all together, it looks like instead of your car dashboard, it looks like more the dashboard of a space shuttle. There's so many gauges. And so how do we kind of narrow that into really the most important dashboard items and metrics that are really going to make sense for our system? So that's our plan this year. We'll bring that back to you.
Thank you, President Flanders. Questions or feedback for President Flanders? All right. Thank you. And I would encourage us as we go about that work to communicate the successes that we're having, because all of your institutions are telling us that an example is the student success measures. You're seeing that reflected in the numbers in increased retention rates and on-time graduation rates. I think it's important. Obviously, a strategic plan should be forward-looking, but I don't want to leave out the real-time effect that it's having right now, particularly when external stakeholders like the governor and the legislature have helped make those possible. I think we need to also focus on messaging the good work that's being done as a result of that plan and the specific, components of it that are making it happen. All right, moving on finally to discussing and adopting the board goals for 25-26. These were really formed from our discussion at the planning retreat back in July. And I'll just run through them quickly in case there's anybody watching online that doesn't have them in front of you. First of all, the goal would be that board staff would lead a structured review and update of the Building a Future Strategic Plan that President Flanders just referenced, and incorporating stakeholder feedback, emerging trends, and performance metrics to ensure continued relevance and impact of public higher education institutions across Kansas. Second goal for the year, we've referenced it several times throughout the summer and definitely at the planning retreat, but Academic Affairs Committee under the leadership of Regent Johnston will collaborate with faculty and academic leadership to conduct a comprehensive review of tenure, post-tenure review, and instructional workload policies at the state universities. Initiative aims to ensure these frameworks support academic innovation, faculty development, and student success. As we've also heard today, the board will initiate a study on 3-year baccalaureate degree models, analyzing approaches from other states, systems, and institutions. The goal is to assess feasibility, identify opportunities for innovation, and ensure Kansas universities remain competitive and responsive to student and workforce needs. And we also talked a little bit at the planning retreat about AI. Regent Parasker obviously has an interest and expertise in that area. So we'll ask the state universities to submit a report detailing current initiatives, research, and instructional strategies related to artificial intelligence. And this effort will help identify best practices, foster collaboration, and position Kansas institutions as leaders in AI-driven education and workforce development. So questions, feedback regarding the proposed goals for the next year? Appreciate all the discussion and work that's gone into forming those goals. If not, would entertain a motion to approve.
Chair Benson,
Yes.
I just wanted to add, I appreciate all of you taking the feedback before the retreat, and I missed
Yes.
it. But I know the goals were in good hands, and we've talked about it a little bit. I just want to add one more aspect, and I shared this with Matt and Blake as well. We also need to think about the impacts in legal way to protect our universities when it comes to AI. I know we all started with that, being very, very cautious. And then we said, okay, the world opened up, we need to open up as well, which is great. I'm not against it. But I am against now that people are setting their foot on the ground. There is a lot more exposure that we don't know what we don't know. So keep your legal close to AI team is what I would suggest.
Yeah. Good feedback. Any other questions, any feedback related to the proposed goals? If not, would entertain a motion to approve.
Mr. Chair, I would move that we approve these goals as they are written here.
Thank you, Vice Chair Mendoza.
I'm second.
Second by Regent Amar. Any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, board goals are adopted. Thank you all again for 2 days of your time and your efforts. We covered a lot of really important business over the last couple of days and appreciate everybody involved. So with that, we will stand adjourned.